name is Bernard O'Mahony. I'm a former Essex Boys gang member and a one-time friend of the Krays. Socially or professionally, I have met most of the UK's most infamous villains. Like a life or death game of poker, a gangster's world is one of bluff and front. Many gangland icons are seen by the public as all-powerful, but a small number of them that are deemed to be reserved, polite and somehow nice are in fact cold-blooded killers. The undisputed godfather of the British criminal underworld is undoubtedly reserved, polite and terrifyingly nice. This is the fascinating yet chilling account of the extraordinary life of London's most feared gangster. Welcome to the world of Frederick Gerald Foreman.
We come from a very rough quarter in Battersea, where it was like there was like stables across the road with donkeys and horses and chickens running around, and then there was a gypsy caravan site next to that, and the railway backed onto that, you know. And it was a very rough quarter, but for a kid to live in, it was lovely, you know. It was excitement, something was happening all the time, and all the pubs used to be full with people, and they used to have their straightened fights outside the pub of a night on a Saturday night, and me and my brothers just go and watch them all. Who's going to fight who this weekend, you know? And they'd have a return match the following week, and you know, challenging one another. And they used to put me up with the crowd. Used to make a circle, and they used to put me up on this window ledge so I could see, because I was only little, you know. So I used to watch it, and I could remember all these things. That was how life was. It's very picturesque, you know. I don't know, sort of carnival sort of atmosphere all the time. But then we moved to Wandsworth Road got a council house, and we was the first people in this block of flats, the only people there in this big block of flats, you know, and watched everybody come in as the removal vans. And then it was 1939 and the bloody war started, wasn't it? And we just got ourselves a bathroom and a toilet, inside bathroom and toilet, you know, instead of the old tin bath and the cooking stove and hot water. And it was luxury for my mother and my parents, and for us to have a bathroom. It was a real luxury, you know. And of course, for what we've been used to, and 5 of us sleeping in one room, you know, and 4 in a bed, and all that was the sort of life we had. And my oldest brother Herbie had a bed over in the corner, and from then life was really started to improve for all the family, and they was finding jobs. They worked, but 2 was in the Territorial Army. So that, of course, when 1939 started, the war started, they had to go straight into the forces, and my other 2 brothers, they went into the army, King's Royal Rifles and the Royal Artillery, and then my 2 other brothers joined the Navy. So we had 2 in the Army and 2 in the Navy. And of course they left, and I was evacuated, you know, for a few months only, to Woking, of all places, only like 20 minutes down the road, you know, in a train. Yeah. But I run away and all things like that. I misbehaved as a little boy. And I missed my family, and I missed my brother, and they got me back, and my father come back and he said, well, Fred, he said, if we all die, we all die together, you know, we die together.
That bulldog spirit that Foreman's father instilled in his sons gave them the tenacity and strength to survive the horrors of the Blitz and the uncertainty and hardship that the Second World War created.
We went back and we stayed there all right through the war and the Blitz, you know, and everything happened then. And we were down and blown out your bed in the floor and the glass, and all the windows coming in, and went down the shelter. And that weekend, the whole building got blown up. The whole block of flats went down.
Your home?
Where we lived, yeah, we never had a thing. My father came down the stairs. He was out on night watch, doing the night watch, wardens do, covered in blood and congealed dust and dried blood on his face, and he said we lost everything. We had nothing, you know. All she had was this handbag, old leather handbag with a few bits and pieces in it, you know. And that's how it was. So, and death and destruction was all around you. You know, neighbours and people were being killed, and the old telegraph boy, the grand boy, was coming round with a telegram saying like missing in action, sons and fathers, and it was a dramatic life for a child, and life was cheap, you know, and it was nothing serious. And the pub across the road where my father used to play darts, he never went this night, and it got a direct hit, and nearly everyone in the pub was killed. You know, that was going on in those days, you know. And of course, my brothers were in the war. My brother got sunk in the Atlantic on a minesweeper. It was the ship got direct hit. It broke in two. He had to go straight into the water, and we heard it on Lord Hawthorne's radio station when we were sitting there listening to the radio, because everybody listened to him, you know, with his propaganda. He used to say Germany calling, in an Oxford accent, you know, Cambridge or Oxford educated man he was, but he was the propagandist for Hitler and the Nazis, and he used to. And everyone listened to him because, you know, fascinated by what he had to say. And he said that this the HMS Fitzroy was sunk in the Atlantic North Sea. He said, and it sunk in 4 minutes. All hands were lost. You know, so that was my brother. It was on that ship. He'd across his hat on every night time he come home on leave. You know, there's no mistake in it. Yeah. And naturally, we was waiting for the telegraph boy to come, you know, with the telegram. And all of a sudden, I'm just standing outside on the balcony. A figure come in and waved to me like with a sailor's hat on. It was George. There's 4 of them survived out of the whole crew, you know, on a Carly float they called it. This was like a cork raft that they used to throw overboard and hang on to, you know. And he got rescued after about 3 or 4 hours in the North Sea, you know. And they give him 2 weeks of furlough, you know, compassionate leave, and after a week he got a telegram sent to him from Chatham, returned to Chatham right away, back down to the neighbour. They thought he was going to go on his toes and do a runner, I suppose, after going for all that, you know. So he went up on the castle. It was a troop ship. It was a liner they used as a troop ship. I think they used it in the Falklands still. It's still around, and the next thing he wound up in Mombasa, and that all the way in Africa, and we joined up with the Mauritius, a cruiser called the Mauritius, and that saw a lot of action. That's reported in you know, if you look through the war records, it was everywhere. My brothers was in Arnhem, the Paras. They was in the Para, and they served in all the European campaigns, in D-Day, and even finished up with the Japanese out in Batavia, taking the surrender of the Japanese. You know, I mean, they saw everything. And of course, when they came out of the army and the navy, the forces, they was treated like crap. They was given like 60 quid gratuity money. That's all they got, you know, for all the 6 years of fighting, risking their lives, and the actions they took, and what they went through, the whole lot. And they got like a Prince of Wales stripe suit, or a Prince of Wales check, or a pinstripe suit, and that's all they. And 60 quid, you know, what can you do with 60? And they had nowhere to live, no homes no private homes of their own, and they was like, my brother was down on Nine Elms shoveling coal off a coal barge onto a conveyor belt.
The war undoubtedly hardened Foreman. Death was his constant companion, and scenes of devastation his playground. It also instilled into him a need to somehow repay, or at least acknowledge, his elder brother's heroism. Too young for gainful employment, that didn't prevent Foreman from acquiring household necessities and the occasional luxury. He wanted to do his bit for his family, regardless of what laws he broke in doing so.
They was treated so shabbily, and they never had no employment, digging trenches. My 2 brothers, all the campaigns they'd fought in during the war, there they are digging trenches for prefabricated houses, you know. And so I was And then the austerity, it was so, all the austerity, the rationing and God knows what. Tea was like a commodity. You could go have a jump up and nick a van load of tea. Would come to like 50 quid a tea chest, you know. But it was money, and that was sort of the start of it all, you know. And then there was the men who used to come around and charge women extortionate prices, and without to pay a shilling a week or something, you know, on a pair of new sheets and a bit of clothing for the kids. So I used to nick their vans when they went in, and you know, and then sell it to them at a third the price. You know what I mean? Or give it away near enough, and it was just like doing a service, really. I saw it as, not as thieving, as much as helping people and helping ourselves at the same time, you know. Yeah. And that's it, how I sort of turned into crime. It wasn't like I said, oh, I'm going to be a criminal.
Despite the nature of his activities, Foreman was keen to be seen as a Robin Hood type rogue rather than a common self-serving thief. However, the majority of villains throughout the UK appeared to not share Foreman's community spirit. South London's Frankie Fraser claimed that the war was the most exciting and profitable time there had been. The best period ever to be a rascal. Causing outrage amongst many, Fraser went on to say that it broke his heart to think that Hitler had surrendered, as the war was a criminal's paradise.
That old wanker Frankie Fraser talks about breaking in people's houses and thought, Hitler he was sick when Hitler gave up because they was having such a good time. I mean, all these people getting killed and families getting ruined.
Glasgow's Walter Norville also believed the chaos of war created a wealth of opportunities for criminals, and they were quite right to exploit them.
When the war came, it was a canter because it was a blackout then. But this time the police knew who we were. You know, they used to chase us away for the corners and that. But they actually knew who was behind it all, you know. It was our wee mob that run about together. And while the blackout was on, you could break a window, you know, and people were never bothered when they heard the noise like that. They were stealing tea and sugar. It was all rationed. And we used to sell it to the bookmakers because they used to buy anything after you. Everything was rationed. So we got tea and sugar and things like that. That was the main things. If we were lucky, if we could get eggs, you only get one egg a month on the rations. So we get a wee case of eggs and that, well, the bookie gave you a fortune for it.
Everybody's house had the key on a string in the door. You could walk in and out every house in the street or in the block of flats. The kids' latchkey, we were called latchkey children, weren't we, from school. We come home from school and put your hand in the letterbox, pulled the key out on a bit of string, and every house was the same. But nobody used to rob anybody, or they had nothing to steal. There was nothing in their homes to nick, innit? Yeah. You know, everybody was poor as church mice. I mean, there was an unwritten law. You never stole off your own. You never robbed people's houses. I've never been guilty of robbing anyone's home or house or personal. You know, there was a rule, unwritten rule. You know, you helped each other and you respected each other's property.
When the last bombs fell and the guns fell silent across Europe, a huge rebuilding program began. American imports flooded the country, and the villains were gifted with a new wealth of merchandise to steal and trade. As they prospered, small firms or gangs were formed.
I formed my own little firm with my brother, a couple of my brothers, and I mean, there was you could nick a big tyre, for instance, off of a lorry. I mean, that's all the way from the Argentina, nice and meaty, these ones, you know, brand new tyres. And it's a spare tyre. But this is the sort of length that it was just cheap stuff. And then all of a sudden, all the goods coming, electrical goods were coming over, because no one had a Hoover, no one had a washing machine or a refrigerator or anything like that, or radiograms, televisions. They didn't exist. after the war. You know, nobody. I mean, in New York, I think when the war ended, I think they had about 9,000 televisions in the whole of New York. You know, so even out there, it wasn't, technology hadn't moved on, so there wasn't the commodities, the things to buy in those days. It was nothing was in the shops like that, and then all of a sudden stuff started to come over, and of course the shops were full of all these electrical goods. Electrical toasters and kettles and things like that. Well, they hadn't seen things of Hoovers and things like that. So, of course, they wanted them. And the docks was doing all right, and I'm in Bermondsey when I'm in South London. So they was earning a few quid out the docks, you know. The old crane driver would drop a parcel, and then they'd all have a little pilfer. And they was making a bit on the side, you know. It hit the side and tipped on the crane. Had a lot of gear fall out and a few bottles of scotch and things like that. So they all used to have their little earners in their own way. So their lifestyle increased. So they was good customers and good. Then they would put in an order to me, say like, can you get us a washing machine, or get us a Hoover cleaner, or get me this or that. And my daughter's getting married and want to say with them. So I used to go to the shops with my brother George, would go inside and he'd chat up with the assistants that were there, keep them occupied, and they used to leave outside a washing machine or a big spin dryer or something like that, electrical goods. And I used to just go around with a brown overall thing on and pick them up and march around the corner and down the side street and sting them in the back of a van and drive. That's how we started off. How I started off, yeah. And then sell them to a third of the price because people couldn't afford the goods that was in the shops. You know, it was too much money for them, and that's how I sort of started off. I felt like a Robin Hood, really. You know, doing people favour, getting them stuff that they couldn't afford.
Hard young men like Foreman could sense a new era was dawning, and so they began fighting hard for pole position. The criminal underworld as we know it today had been born.
I was nicked when I was 16. I was at the #1 court at the Old Bailey in a Central Criminal Court, and that was for a street rows and fight, you know, sort of gang fight, you know. And I went to one with Scrubs, and I was too young. They put me in Stanford House because I was too young to go to the Scrubs. And that was the sort of beginning of getting a criminal record, you know. But I used to box for the Battersea Boxing Club, and I used to belong to Jack Solomon's nursery, which on a Sunday morning in Windmill Street. It was a professional gym, but they had it open on a Sunday morning for all the young amateurs to see if there's any promising young amateurs coming along to their turn pro. You know, it was a cunning move, really, from the promoter's point of view, Jack Solomon's. And I used to see all the top fighters coming over after the war, you know, when the Freddie Mills was and Bruce Woodcock and all them type of fighters. I used to see Joe Baskey, Tammy Murriello, and all the fighters who come from America to fight here. But we used to go to coffee stalls all over London. Had a coffee stall, like say, and I used to. And I worked in Covent. I never used to work in Covent Garden, but I used to go to Covent Garden a lot. And they had a bit of a straightener there with a fella, and we had a bit of a tear up in a cafe, and it went down a little bit of history. And the reputation started building up, you know. I was like I could have a fight on the streets, a street fighter sort of thing. And at the coffee stalls, they would say there was one at Clapham Common. I know they used to sort of have people challenge you and say, you know, oh, you fancy your chances, or in fact we've got someone here who fucking can beat you, and all that used to go on. You know, it was a sort of it was all the macho fucking stuff, you know. Excuse me swearing, but it was the alpha male coming out in you, you know. And I finished up. We used to go round to these coffee stalls, and I can tell you this now, quite honestly, that the Elephant and Castle had a coffee stall. Campbell Green had a coffee stall, Clapham Common had a coffee stall, Wandsworth Road had a coffee stall, Wells End, Chelsea had a coffee stall, Two Inback had a coffee stall, and I had a fight in every one of them. Yeah, I used to go down the side street and have a straightener, you know. But that, and then you go back and have a cup of tea and a meat pie and a sausage sandwich afterwards. You know, there was no animosity. You know, it was all right. We won. Take your coats off. They used to make a circle and you'd have to get at it. You know, but this is how we used to be, and that sort of reputation, I suppose, that's what made you who you were. You know.
Yeah. Across the River Thames in London's East End, the Cray brothers were forming their own gang. Twins Ronnie and Reggie specialised in violence. Their older brother Charlie preferred to trade in stolen goods. It wasn't long before Foreman, the prolific thief, came into contact with Charlie, the first-rate fence.
I had about 3 lockups up at Herne Hill in the back of Brixton, and I used to stock all the goods in these three garages, you know. Then I was put in touch with a fella from the East End who would come over and work for another buyer who used to lay out all the money on the crooked gear, and who was it who came over to see me was none other than Charlie Cray. And this is the first time I came in touch with the Cray brothers, with Charlie Cray, and we worked together. And he used to come over and he'd look at all the garages full up with stuff, and he'd say, "I'll take it all, Fred, I'll take it a lot." And he used to come over with his van and make several trips and pay on cash. So that saved me hawking it around to different people, you know, to sell personal bits and pieces. So he used to take the whole lot. And then he used to talk to me about the twins and his 2 brothers, you know, and they was young because they was like that much younger than me, 5 years or so younger. So, and he used to tell me the trouble and the problems they used to get into and how they was performing, and, you know, there was a worry to their mother and all the rest of it. And there was a worry to him as well, you know, Charlie. They'd give him a hard life and hard time. And that was my first connection with the Cray family. But then afterwards, I did a thing down in Southampton, and it came on top down there. And I was down there with Buster Edwards and Tommy Wisby, who was nicked later on in the train robbery, and we'd left a bit of we cleared out a warehouse place there with a shop with a warehouse at the back, and that was early in the morning. We went there, stayed overnight, and hit it in the morning before it opened up. And of course, when we left there, we got on the road back, and then Tom had left it a bit of a radiogram, and he left his prints. He thinks he handled it, and he left his fingerprints on this bit of this radiogram. So I said, "You carry on, and I'll go back and get it." And me and Buster went back to get it. But when we went back, there was a guy cleaning the windows, the window cleaner of the shop, and then there was a fellow up with a paper stall opened up right on outside the shop. So the 2 of them looked at us as we walked in and had to knock the door open again, and then pick up the thing and take it out, walk it round the corner and put it in the boot of the car. So it was on us, you know, we was recognised. So we caught the van up on the way back, and said, "We got it, so you're all right," you know, we got the article he left behind, and drove home. But that little event, Tommy took my van and got nicked with it, and that's how I came into the frame. And they raided me one morning, and I went out knocking on the front, coming in the front door, and I'm going out the back door over the back gardens and in me pants and stuff, you know. Caught us early in the morning, and I had a car round the next street I used to park, and I managed to get over to the East End.
On Christmas Day 1957, Ronnie Cray's beloved Aunt Rose died, and he suffered a complete breakdown. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to Longgrove Asylum near Epsom in Surrey. Reggie immediately began planning to free his identical twin.
What decided me to get Ron away from Longgrove Nuthouse in Epsom was some of the stories he told me about the place. One day he was sitting there eating an apple, and this nutter come along and smacked him in the eye, which he retaliated just because he was eating an apple, because his place was full of nutters. So Ron said, I've had enough of this place. So I decided to take him out there. It was quite exciting, really.
When Ronnie Kray returned to London, his twin brother Reggie moved him into a flat here in Adelina Grove, where he was joined shortly afterwards by fellow fugitive Freddie Foreman.
And they looked after me, the Kray twins, and I stayed in Ronnie Kray's flat when he'd escaped from Epsom, and he was holed up in his flat. And they gave me his flat to live in. And I couldn't walk down the street in South London without old Bill would recognise me, or I couldn't survive there. But going across that bit of what was like going across the pond, you know, going across to France or somewhere, he was in a different world over there. And I had the freedom to move around and do, you know, carry on. And I got my wife and kids over there. They went to school over there, and that's how I come to live in the East End and got to know the Kray family very well. The only good memories I've got is going round to their house and with my kids and meeting their mother, you know, Violet. And she would take the kids. She was a lovely, lovely woman, and she'd take the kids in. I'll take them, hello, Freddie, and Jamie and Gregory, and she'd take them in the kitchen and give them a sandwich or, you know, drop a lemonade. And she was a very beautiful woman, lovely, typical Cockney mother, you know. The old man used to keep it out the back. You never see much of him, the father. But the twins, and it was always, the house was always full of different people, you know, the firm laying around and in the vicinity. They was never on their own, really. There was always someone about 6, 7 or 8 people, some 10, 15 people sometimes, you know, when I used to come over to my pub, when I had a pub, the Prince of Wales, and they never ever ventured anywhere on their own, the two of them. They always was firm-handed, you know. I never trusted Reggie. I thought he sat on the fence and he would go whatever way suited him, whereas Ronnie was more, if he gave his word, he would stick to his word. Dave was the nuttiest one of the two, and he was on this horse tranquilizer and knock a horse over, what he used to take, you know. But he needed that every day to keep himself, because he was manic depressive, you know, and he thought if people looked at him too long, he thinks they're going to attack him or something. You know, he was one of those very insecure people.
Had Foreman an inkling of what misery his association with the Kray brothers would bring, it's unlikely he would have accepted their hospitality. Outwardly friendly, the Krays provided genuine assistance and support for Foreman and his family. But like villains throughout time, favours are given, but a mental note of any debt is made for future reference. Gambling was still illegal in the 1950s, and muscle, like Foreman and the Krays, was needed by the likes of gangland godfather Jack Spot to protect the bookies.
There's a number of gangs in London working the protection racket, and with the help that's been passed in Parliament with the betting laws and the gambling laws, they've got it very easy.
You mean that the law now makes it easier for the protectionists?
Well, of course, there's big money involved, you see, in these betting shops and these gambling clubs.
If you turn the clock back to the 50s, really, when things was mad. I was down on the racetrack with Jack Spot and them with the twins, you know, when they was fighting over the bookies' joints and Brighton races and different race meetings, and then the illegal gambling, when the gambling wasn't allowed, you had street bookmakers, and you had to prove, to get a betting shop, you had to prove that you had convictions for street bet bookmaking and show that you had convictions before you get a licence to open up a betting shop. How about that? You know, that's one of what people don't know.
At the end of the 1950s, several of the coffee bars where Foreman had earned his ruthless reputation introduced afternoon dancing. The most popular being the Two Eyes Coffee Bar in Soho. Considered to be the birthplace of British rock and roll and the popular music industry, the Two Eyes Bar and others soon transformed into what we now know as nightclubs. Foreman and the Krays realised that there was money to be made.
I had the walk-in club with my brother George, and Buster used to work behind the bar there, and Ronnie King on the door, and all nice people. And we went into the club business, you know, and the walk-in club in Lambeth Walk, you know, and then we went on to, we had a dozen different clubs over in the South London, all up and down in the 211 club.
Foreman was also instrumental in securing nightclubs for the craze.
I introduced them to Stephen LaFay, who was the guy who had the club in Knightsbridge. I was there on the meeting when they took it over, but they took the East End to Knightsbridge. You know, all them ugly-looking bastards with their cuts down their faces and all that, and flat noses. And they should have left the club as it was and run it as without it, and just sat back and collected the debts that was owed. That's all they needed to do. But of course they ruined the place, like they ruined every fucking thing, you know. Anyway, every club they had and business they had, they ruined it with the clientele they used to take down there and the people around them.
I'd see people laughing and having a good time 5 minutes before he walked through the door. The minute he walked through the door, that laughter stopped. The conversation dimmed. People were terrified that he would say, "Are you laughing at me?" And then he had that paranoid feeling that they were laughing at him, and then there'd be a bloodbath.
Foreman realised that when it came to business, the Krays were a liability rather than an asset. He recruited men for his own firm, which went on to carry out some of Britain's most audacious armed robberies. Not all were successful. In December 1961, a relatively straightforward heist turned into a bloodbath that became known as the Battle of Bow.
At approximately 10 a.m, the wages vehicle was due to arrive here at the gasworks.
It was a big, strong, armoured van that went through London, delivering to all the big power stations, taking their wages. And it had on board about 150 grand, 145 grand, I think there was.
As the security van reached Bowes Common Road, coming down here to Turner's Road, it was rammed in front by a lorry. And simultaneously another lorry, this brown covered one behind me, drove up alongside. Then a 1500 weight van was driven up here and chains were attached to the door of the security van. The doors were then dragged off. And
there was 2 guards from and a police officer from the city with an Alsatian dog. That was the security on board. And 2 of the guards were armed with revolvers, and which we was unaware of.
So when the back doors had been ripped off, the robbers were outside, and the guards, you know, apart from the shock of the vehicle, were still sort of in control of the situation, pulled out their guns and began to open fire.
Now, inside the security van at the time were 2 guards and a police constable with his dog Flash. In the struggle that followed, one of the bandits, they were all dressed with skid lids and gas masks, one of the bandits was shot. At the same time, the police constable was injured and he is now in hospital.
And when it came to climbing in the back and getting the money, the most important thing, there was 2 men there standing over it with revolvers firing away at us, which hit two of the firm, shot 2 of the firm, and we had to lick our wounds and carry them away.
As far as we know, no money was taken, and the gang made their getaway, carrying with them the wounded man.
Detectives investigating the robbery discovered that one of the men had left their fingerprints on a pepper gun which had been made to temporarily disable the guards.
They soon established who the fingerprints belonged to, and a warrant was issued for one of Foreman's firm.
One of the firms got arrested for conspiracy to rob, which was unfortunate. So that put it on the firm. So that, I mean, that became quite a talking point in the underworld.
Rather than give himself up, this firm member spoke to Foreman and asked if anything could be done. He in turn turned to Ronnie Cray, who took the man to a North London doctor, and Ronnie Cray asked the doctor if he would help them, And this doctor filled out a bogus appointment in his record book, saying that on the day of the robbery and at the time of the robbery, this man had been in his surgery receiving treatment. When the man gave himself up to the police, he was charged with the robbery and went on trial at the Old Bailey. The doctor was called to give evidence, and he confirmed that the man had been in his surgery, he'd been treating him, and the appointments book was produced to prove this, and the man was acquitted. The mistakes made during the Battle of Bow changed Foreman's thinking about how he would carry out robberies in the future.
From then on, people said, how can you pull out now without guns? You know, if you're going to go and have a big payroll, you're not to know you're walking into a gunfire and bullets being flying around. So it made every firm take one with them after that shotgun. Because, for instance, if we had a shotgun that day, we would have got the prize, we would have got the money. You know, if we let a couple go, and then that might have got their heads down and thought twice about shooting us, you know. You don't take it for show. You know, if you have to use it, you got to use it. Not deliberately to kill anyone, but of course, once you pull the trigger, you never know what's going to happen. So, you know, but we were prepared to use them. It seemed to change the whole scene, the London scene, and it didn't deter people from going out. It was a turning point, really. But that was one of the things that sort of elevated you, or without even talking about it or bragging about it, that elevated the firm up a few steps.
On December the 17th, 1964, armed robber Jimmy Evans and his associate Tommy Marks came to these flats and knocked the door of number 12. Freddie Foreman's brother George answered the door. There was a loud explosion and a shotgun blast propelled him back down the hallway. According to Jimmy Evans, he'd been having sex with his wife.
If anyone was messing around with my wife at the time, I would have probably done the same thing as what happened. George was a bit of lethargic, you know, where women were concerned, and also the fact that we had the walk-in club, and on a Friday night you'd get 6 or 7 girls come in all on their own, you know, and they're having a good time and a laugh and a joke and a drink, and they were sort of up for it, if you know what I mean. Unbeknown to me, he'd had really struck up this strong relationship with this girl, and she was married to someone else who was out the West End, but he didn't know George. He might have known George, but he didn't know the relationship between him and me, I don't think, or he couldn't have done at the time, because if he had known, he wouldn't have done what he did. And the Ginger Marks guy who took him over there, he should have known better. But the two of them were out thieves and doing a little bit petty, you know, really. They wasn't doing anything, a few fires and things like that, and a few burglaries, and it's supposed to have been blowing safes and that, but I don't know anyone who could blow a fucking safe. It's a load of, and they used to blow the building down more than blow the safes out. And there was burning them open. That was different. We used to do that properly and do it proper. But they couldn't. For some reason or other, they found out about it, and I didn't know anything that was going on. All I knew was someone come round to me and got the message that George was in hospital, in St Thomas's Hospital, and someone had shot him on his doorstep while he was having a meal with his wife and kids. Ginger knocked at the door. He went and answered the door, and then he asked for a Moody address. He said I didn't know who it was, and he shut the door and he went back to sit down and have something to eat. And then another knock on the door. He goes and answers the door again, and all the light had been taken out outside on the landing, and it's all pitch black. And then someone stepped out of the shadows with a shotgun and blasted him in the lower area, caught him in the top of the leg, and he hit the passage at the end of the passage, and. Next thing you know, he's in hospital with a big hole in his leg, and at point blank range, you see. If it'd been back a bit further, the shot it would have spread out and it would have done more damage. And to his personal part, but he was lucky in that respect. And of course, I'll go to the hospital, and the police stay on the bed, and they went and had a cigarette, and now over there, and he just whispered Ginger Tom, and that's the only name I had. It wasn't Marks I was really wanted at the time. It was the other fella who shot my brother, but they were both as guilty as each other because they was conspirators, and they both knocked on the door at the same time, and the Ginger Marks. They was the two people who did it. Yeah, but you see, my brother never gave evidence against them, though he knew it was them. When he was laying in hospital, he had 3 operations. They were going to cut his leg off at the top from the hip down. I mean, it was touch and go. It was just before Christmas as well, so they couldn't get an anaesthetist to do the deep amputation of the leg. Otherwise, they was going to do it this night, and by the next day, they managed to stem the blood flow, in his artery in his leg, so they never took his leg off. Otherwise, they would have done. But this was the condition he was in, you see. So naturally, I was a bit angry about that, and I had to retaliate. Well, all London knows if anything happened to my brother, what I'm going to do. I'm not going to just sit back and let it go. So they was waiting for the response, or everyone in London, in the so-called Underworld, was waiting to see what was going to happen. Well, the twins knew everyone in the East End, and so when I went to see the twins, they told me who Ginger Tom was, and so that was Tommy Marks. And that's how I come to find. Then I found out through that who the other fellow was.
To assist Foreman in his hunt for the gunman, the Krays arranged to meet Evans in an East End nightclub where a seemingly innocent photograph was taken. This was then given to Foreman to help him identify his brother's would-be assassin.
17 days after George Foreman had been shot, Jimmy Evans and 3 other men arrived here in Redmonds Road, where Tommy Marks lived. It was around midnight when they knocked his door, and his wife Anne answered the door. She led him into a back room where they started talking to Marks, and she went into the kitchen. She was quite concerned because she was 3 months pregnant with Tommy's 3rd child, and she didn't want him getting in any trouble. When they came out the room, she had a feeling that something wasn't right, and Tommy said that he was going to go out for an hour. She pleaded with him not to go, but he was insistent that he had to go. Just before he left, he said he loved her and closed the door. She never saw her husband Tommy Marks ever again.
It took a month or so to track it all down, but they was going to sell their jewellery to a certain person when they was going on a robbery, and they told me that they, when they was going to work the night before, and they was going to buy the jewellery what they got off the robbery. So that's how I come to know where they was going to be that particular night, you see. So I just plotted up there and waited for them.
Approximately an hour after he'd left his flat, Evans and Marks came walking along this road towards the Carpenter's Arms. Foreman, Gerard and 2 other members of their firm were coming in the opposite direction in a van. They saw Ginger Marks and Evans pulled up next to him, and it is alleged that they shouted "Ginge." Some people say this referred to Ginger Marks, others say that they meant to call out Jimmy for Jimmy Evans. But whichever version is right, one of them leaned towards the van, and Foreman and the others opened fire. Approximately 5 shots were fired. Marks fell to the floor, and Jimmy Evans ran around the corner and hid underneath the vehicle. Whilst he's making good his escape, members of Foreman's firm got out of the vehicle, and Marks was still alive. They dragged him into the vehicle, and he was never seen again.
This guy ran straight round to the twins' house, which is the next turning, and they didn't want to know him. They said, "If you've had a row with Foreman, you can better fuck. We can't help you. He's our pal. You better fuck off. It's your problem, not ours." And they wouldn't help him, though he did know them well, and they knew him. And they knew the Ginger fellow because they had car dealings with him. He used to sell cars for them and that, He was part of their firm at one stage,
The only thing left at the scene was Tommy Marks' glasses and a pool of blood. A senior member of Foreman's firm disposed of the body, but he has never disclosed the whereabouts or the method he used, although there have been, of course, many theories.
They used to have a pole. He had couple of breakers yards. He had one over the water.
Oh, that's right. You did
And he
tell me.
had one at Dartford. He used to break lorries up, smelt Ellie, and he had a big aluminium smelt. And what he used to do, he used to have an old chest freezer. He used to put them in there.
Freeze them up.
Then he'd cut them up
No
and
blood.
put them in the smelt.
No blood once
And if there's
frozen.
any bones left, we used to crush them all up and then go and throw them in the river. And that's how we disposed of the bodies.
When the Krays heard about the incident, they were extremely impressed, because back in the 60s, no body meant no crime. This was, the Krays believed, an opportunity for Foreman to repay his debts to them, and an opportunity for them to commit murder without fear of being caught. The very thought of being free to murder at will coursed through schizophrenic Ronnie Kray's veins. Nobody was now safe, and the Krays, backed up with Foreman's muscle and body disposal facility, believed that they could now not only control the East End, but the whole of London. The West End was a goldmine, and seizing control of it became a priority for the Krays. Only two things stood in their way: brothers Charles and Eddie Richardson.
In the 60s, it was great, because when it was good, it was very, very good. I mean, you had a nice Bentley car, pulled up nightclubs and all this and that, everything was going on. It was great, you know, and then that was probably the best period, you know, when all that was going on.
If you had the West End, that's the jewel in the crown in London. Not the pubs, not this, not that, the West End. The West End is a money-making machine. And they had their finger in every pie. If the machine went into a club, they was basically minding the club without putting anyone on the door or whatever. But they were very honest and very good with everyone. They weren't greedy. They invited, if anyone went to work with them, they put them in on the coup and give them a fair share. And that's what made my dad and Eddie so good.
Well, yeah, certain people was honourable, yeah, and other people wasn't. So I've always been considered honourable. That's why I got a lot of opportunities and offered different things that other people wouldn't have ever had a sniff of.
And they said the Richardsons didn't want to know the twins.
Do you remember a time when there was a meeting where the Krays were saying to the Richardsons, look, we'll have a deal over this, and Eddie told them to piss off a bit there.
It was in the scrapyard at Dog Kennel Hill in Camberwell. And Richardson said, we don't want to know about you twins. I didn't want, because they was getting too much business themselves. They were a rich firm, the Richardsons.
And what was Ronnie saying to them?
Let's cut the West End up in a sensible sort of way, because he thought he would watch a few American gangster films and he saw how Dutchy Schultz and Al Capone done it, and he thought he could do it the same way.
But Richardson wasn't having it.
And he said, no, we don't want to know.
It was sort of underlying rivalry. We never actually clashed in any way, you know. There was an animosity. It had a few little near fallouts in the West End, different clubs and things. What happened was the row. I mean, there was a fellow who had 6 betting shops, you know, betting offices, and one of these young guys, he was only 20, Kenny Hampton. He was a lovely kid, and the girls liked him because he's a good-looking boy. And he was in a club one night, at the Stalk Club, I think it was, yeah. And he got bashed up down in the toilets for no reason or other. They kicked the shit out of him. I find out that Eddie and Fraser and them had done. And the rest of the firm. So my brother George had the Red Salve Club up at Clapham Common, and they were all down there. And George rang me. He said, "Well, they're all downstairs." And so I went down there, and I was very angry. And I only went with one person, Ronnie King, and they was all in a group. And I went over and I pulled him. I pulled Eddie about it, and I stuck this 38 up his nostril, you know, up his nose. And I was shaking because I could have easily let it go, you know, because when you're angry, you shake, you tremble a little bit, you know. We had a little argument, fallout, and I said, well, that prize, if anybody, I just said, if that happens to anybody else, who, I said, you had the story, you kicked the dog, you kicked the master. I said, and that kid worked for me. I said, and he's started going to hospital, and that made out it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. It was a liberty, and I saw it that way, and then I said my piece, and then I walked out and I left.
As Ginger Marks discovered to his cost, when Foreman thinks that a liberty has been taken, it never does end well. The battle lines had been drawn between the Krays, Foreman and the Richardsons. The war eventually broke out in Mr. Smith's, a South London nightclub where the Krays' cousin Dickie Hart was murdered.
Someone from up north, through Billy Hill actually, and he got in touch with Billy, and then he put us in touch to put a couple of people on the door in the club. To, you know, so that's what we was going to do. We went over there and was unaware that other things had been going on, and people thought we was going over there to put it on them, when we wasn't at all. We were just going over there to feel the ground out and things like that.
I walked up to Dickie. I said, what you doing? He's gone, a Luger. I said, a Luger, it was a Luger. He said, Jim, it's going to be war tonight. He said, I'll be. I said, Dick, I said, don't be silly. Took the gun off him, put it in the girl's bag that I was with, right? Then boom, 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 everything else happened. Then Dickie Hart, somehow or other, he got the gun.
Anyway, they had 2 guns. We never had no guns. So, and then one of them wanted to have a fight with me. We had a fight on the dance floor. Right? I done him on the dance floor, set astride of him. I wanted to really punch his head through the fucking floorboard, to be quite honest. But I was waiting to get shot in the back. My mate had already been shot in the arm, Harry Rawlins, blood come out, spurting out everywhere. So I'm waiting to get shot for beating him, to be honest. So I didn't go too strong. He's crying out, I've had enough, I've had enough. So I got up and left him. Then there was a bit of movement from outside. Someone tried to get outside, get out the back door, right? So they ran out the back door. So everyone ran out the back door. And that's when Dickie Hart lost his gun, and he'd already shot Fraser with it and Harry Rawlins with it. It's quite a big 45, you know. And he finished up getting the gun, and he got one from the gun, but he didn't survive it.
And all of a sudden the phone went. I went, hello, it's Ted. He went, Jim, Dickie Hart's dead, got killed. I said, oh, I'll see you in the morning. I thought, God, no, that was it.
Eddie and Fraser and all the rest of the firm had been down there, and it kicked off. About 4 people had been shot, you know, with shotguns and everything, and they'd been killed. The little fella, Dickie Hart, and he was the casualty.
Ronnie Jeffries got shot, I got shot, Fraser got shot, Harry Rawlins got shot. You know, I mean, it was a big lot of publicity, a lot of bad publicity as far as we're concerned about it.
Fraser likes to make out he did it, but he didn't do it at all, because they had to carry him out with his legs shattered. And of course, that was like an open warfare now. It was sort of, that was the beginning of all the trouble.
The night after Dickie Hart's murder, Ronnie Kray heard that George Cornell was drinking in the Blind Beggar pub. He summoned his friend Ian Barry, and as they entered the premises, Barry fired 2 shots into the ceiling. Ronnie saw Cornell at the bar, and as he approached him, Cornell said, "Look who's here." But Ronnie didn't answer. He pulled out a Luger and shot Cornell through the forehead. Cornell slumped forward and eventually fell to the floor, where he died moments later.
Georgie Cornell was from East London, and he'd gone over to South London to join up with the Richardson firm, and so they felt that he he's just changed his loyalties from east to south, you know. I told Ronnie Cray afterwards, I said, he should never have done that, or gone in that pub. It's like their front room. They lived above it, they had their kids above it, and they'd shot, and Ian Barry shot shots in the ceiling, could have gone up and injured their family upstairs, you know what I mean? And it should never go in a person's house. Should have waited for Georgie Cornell to come out if they wanted to shoot him, and he'd come out and got in his car or something, not in the pub in front of witnesses and other people and barmaids and everybody else. And I said it was a stupid thing to do. And they used to help the crowd. If they were short of money, they'd give them a few quid, you know. And it was a liberty what they'd done. And Georgie Cornell was all right. I knew him and his family, Olive and all their family from South. They was from South London. And they was nice people, you know, good people. And George was all right. I liked George. He was okay.
On the 30th of July 1966, England celebrated defeating West Germany in the World Cup final at Wembley. Across the city in the East End, the Krays and Foreman celebrated the arrest of the Richardson gang. Now that every credible threat to their dominance had been removed, the Krays embarked upon an orgy of mindless violence that was designed to demonstrate their power and cement control. On the 12th of December 1966, Frank Mitchell was sprung from Dartmoor prison and brought to a flat on Barking Road in East London.
Frank Mitchell was a product of the environment. He stole a bike when he was a little kid, and his father, instead of going round to the person's house and saying, look, my son's just nicked your boy's bike, here's his bike back, he didn't do that. He took him to the police station. He got the kid in juvenile court, and this was the beginning of Frank Mitchell's career as a criminal, really. And it was his father instigated it, really. And he had no confidence or trust in his own father. Where do you go from there, you know?
Mitchell started off when he was a 16-year-old kid. He stole a push bike. He got nicked for that. And then he went through the system, Borstal. But he was so volatile. If a screw said something to him, he chinned him, and that was it. And that followed him right through all the different. He'd been to Rampton, Broadmoor, Wakefield, all the top nicks, and none of them could control him. So why the Trims thought they could control him, I don't know.
Ronnie Craig got friendly with him in Wandsworth, and he used to send visitors in, give him money in, and look after him. And of course, that's how their relationship. He looked at Ronnie Cray like as a hero. Mitchell looked at him and thought he was a hero, you know. And because he wound up in Rampton for the criminal insane, and he was a handful for the prison system, and with attacking screws and other prisoners. And I know he stabbed Bruce Reynolds in Worm Scrubs in the bathhouse, which I never forgot. I remember. Yeah, Bruce was good. He was a great pal of mine, Bruce. And I was when I heard about that. I wasn't happy about that anyway. But then he escaped from Rampton with another prisoner, and they was on the run, and they got an axe, and they was the Axe Men. They were then, and in the newspapers. But they got captured and sent back, and then he was sent to Broadmoor for the criminal insane. So he wound up in Broadmoor, and then he escaped again from Broadmoor, and he got himself an axe again. You know, when he terrorised an old couple in there, and nicked their car and their jewellery and their watch and things like that. So then he got captured again. So he went back to Broadmoor. And then I don't know how many years, 17 years or so later, he went to Dartmoor, and of course, by this time, after all these years had gone by, they'd been in touch with him and writing to him and sending him money and stuff like that. Ronnie Craig, because he was a very generous person, Ronnie Craig. because Ronnie, when he got out of Epsom, he kept free for 6 months, and then he got a date to go back from Epsom mental place, asylum, whatever it is there, back to Wandsworth to finish his bird and get a release date. But when you're in those asylums and places, they never give you a date because they never know when they're going to let you free. So this is what was happening with Frank Mitchell. So Ronnie, with all his connections and his political connections with these different people, Boothby and Co. and Dryburgh and all that activities that were going on, he thought he could pull a few strings, and if he got Mitchell out, he would be able to get him a release date. And if he handed himself in after 6 months and behaved himself and never got in any trouble.
The initial plan was Mitchell would remain in the flat, and various members of the Cray firm would write letters to the media highlighting his plight in the hope that he could get a release date.
So this is how it all engineered. Ronnie's crazy idea to get him out, you know, one of his mad things. He got him out, and of course he exchanged one prison for another because he was holed up in a room. He thought he could go out and club it out and put himself on the firm and go and do all sorts of villainy with the twins and be their right-hand man, and, you know, in his mentality. And of course he couldn't do none of those things. All he could do was exchange one prison for another, really.
Unfortunately, Mitchell, a huge man with an uncontrollable temper, made a lot of demands. He wanted a woman, the Crays brought him a woman. He wanted food, they brought him food. But nothing could really make him happy.
So they did everything to keep him quiet, got him an hostess and some sex and things like that. And tried their best to keep him sweet. And then the idea was to smuggle him out abroad, you know, to get him to Australia or Spain or somewhere where he could live the rest of his life, not in a happy, or get him in the country. And he would never be able to survive here in England, you know, but get him out of the country might have been all right. And I had the facilities to do that because I'd got people out of the country previous, you know, train robbers out of the country. I managed to do that, you know. He got too much for them. I mean, they couldn't handle him. They was fucking had minders around there looking after him 24 hours 7.
He's in a flat in Barking?
Yeah.
Eventually, Mitchell started saying, "I want to get out. I want to go and walk around the streets." He became an absolute headache for the twins. So with Foreman's debt and facilities in mind, they decided to murder him.
So they had minders looking after him day and night, and they was all terrified and shit scared of him. And they was complaining all the time. And so they got me over, asked me to come over, and I went to see Reggie and Charlie, and they said, "Can you get us out of trouble here and help us?" And they had rings under their eyes, and he threatened to go round and take their mother hostage, and he knew what to blame and he would take 6 coppers with him. If it was the police turned up, he would shoot his way out and take 6 coppers with him. This was what he was saying.
The time had come for the Crays to call in the favours that were owed to them. Foreman and his associates were asked to murder Mitchell and dispose of his body using their facility. A man of his word, Foreman agreed that the debt would be honoured.
So now they're really worried now. So now they've got to get some help from somewhere, and they come to me again. So I'll go over and see him, and so I made arrangements to pick him up and take him out of the country, you know, take him away down the country. And this is what happened.
On the night of Christmas Eve 1966, Albert Donoghue was in the flat with Frank. Some men came to the door and said, "You know, we're going to take you to see the twins. The girl will have to stay here, but you come with us." So Albert walked out of the flat with Frank. He said goodbye to the girl, and they went out through that door into the street.
We had to separate Mitchell from the girl. And he wouldn't trust anyone else, only me, because I got him off the moor. So he trusted me. So my job was to get him out of the house, away from the girl. So I said to him, "Look, what we do, we go and spend of a few weeks with Ronnie and Christmas, but you know what he's like, he won't have a woman around him. So I said, we'll let her follow on, we'll go on ahead and let her follow on. I said, then if we get stopped, it's every man for his circle, but she won't be involved, so he liked the idea of that.
After leaving the flat, Albert Donoghue and Frank Mitchell walked around the corner to Ladysmith Avenue.
As we turned into the main road, there's a skinny young copper come walking towards us, beat copper. I thought, for fuck's sake, don't say. Yeah, you'd expect to say, excuse me, sir, because his father was over all the papers and on the television. Yeah. I thought he'd going to say, excuse me, sir, are you Mr. Mitchell? He'd have fucking slaughtered him. I broke and tense up beside us. I said, come, Frank, turn it in. We went round the corner and there was a van.
Parked on the curbside was an old commerce-style van. The back doors were open and inside sat Freddie Foreman and another man named Alfie Gerard. They motioned for Mitchell to get into the vehicle and he sat on the wheel casing.
And that's when I started to realise there's something funny happening here. So, but now the guy comes out the passenger seat, goes round the back and slams the door. Then he comes back and he gets in the passenger seat and slams that door. And I didn't know till later that that was the signal. That they were all settled and the guns opened up right behind me. Gerard was here next to me.
8:30 at night, a fella called Donoghue brought him out and walked him around and put him in the back and climbed in the van with him. And he should never climbed in the van, but he did.
He had a revolver, right? Foreman was the other side of him with an automatic. So I'm thinking, well, a revolver's got maximum 6 rounds. Automatic, anything up to 20.
The people in the flat heard the gunshots going off, you know, they heard the shots going off. So it was car backfiring and all that, and the girl panicked, and they panicked, and everybody panicked.
But the guns opened up, pow, 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 pow. And poor old Frank, he went down, his knees doubled underneath him, he was lying back. And they were still popping them into him. I estimate there must have been at least 12 shots.
But the twins wanted him out, didn't they? And they got him out. And look what they done to him.
And he put it come behind his ear, pow. That was it. And they took off. Got to back around, I said, drop me here. So they opened the back up, and I got out. Because to me it was logical. I'm the piggy in the middle, I'm South London firm, East London firm, I'm the piggy in the middle. I should have gone logically, you know. And I'm walking away from the van. I thought, definitely going to get one. Now I went back to the flat, we all wiped it down, the wet cloth and the dry cloth, wet and dry right through, every surface. And they were all saying, we heard the bangs, what did you do to him? I said, shut up that man, it was car backfire. Anyway, the girl was getting a bit excited. And I phoned Reggie and said, that dog won. She said, I said, the dog is dead, but I never. I said, the dog won. That was to tell Reggie that Mitchell was off the plot, you know.
The phone call went through and Reggie Cray said, Donoghue said that dog has won, you know, which was to say that everything was okay, you know. That was the sort of code message.
Foreman was now bonded by blood to the Crays. Immersed in their psychotic, homicidal world, he knew that leaving unscathed was going to be increasingly difficult the longer he remained. But events ensured that he could never be free of the Crays, and the debt he owed them would never be paid. 6 months after Mitchell's murder, Reggie Cray's young wife Frances committed suicide. This tragic event resulted in Reggie turning to drink and drugs, which sent him on a downward spiral into self-destruction. Ronnie Cray's deteriorating mental health and Reggie's drug and alcohol-drenched depressed state left the Cray empire teetering on the edge of the abyss. Foreman was trying to distance himself from them, but his ability to make bodies disappear drew the bloodthirsty Crays ever closer. 4 months after Francis committed suicide, Reggie stabbed a man to death in a drunken rage.
On the night after the funeral, he was in the Regency having a drink, getting rotten drunk, and Jack the Hat came round to shoot any one of the Cray brothers, the Hat, Jack McVitie, and I know he's on pilled up, he was always on speed and stuff and like had too much drink, but he went round to shoot Reggie Cray, Ronnie Cray or Charlie, or any one of them. And they had a bit of an argument on the door, and the two doormen took the shotgun off him, and the shotgun went off and blew a hole in the door. Well, Reggie was just sitting inside there, up at the bar, rotten drunk at the time. So he had a very narrow escape then. And so to me, that the week later, they found out what happened, and that's the reason they murdered Jack the Hat. Well, they give him money to go and shoot this guy, Leslie Payne, a fella called Payne, who worked for them. He turned out wrong, and he was the first one to make statements to the police, because they sent Jack round to shoot him, Jack the Hat. They give him money to go and shoot him, and he never did it. He took the money and drank it all and bought pills with it, or whatever he did with it, but he never did what he was supposed to do.
The twins were clearly upset with McVitie. So on October the 29th, 1967, they invited him to this house where there was it was just a local house party going on. And prior to his arrival, the twins turned up, told the host to get rid of all the guests. They waited down in the room in the basement, and a couple of other members of their firm were on the stairs. McVitie arrived, he was very drunk, been popping pills all night, so wasn't really, with it.
The Lambriano brothers took him to this party, and when they got him down there, and there was they just fucking challenged him and finished up stabbing him to death.
When he was in the front room, Ronnie Cray grabbed hold of him, and Reggie Cray was meant to shoot him, but the gun he had was duff, messed it up like most things they did. And Ronnie got him in a bear hug, and he was saying to Reggie, do him, I've done mine, you do yours.
Bender got a knife from the kitchen, one of them fucking carving knives,
Reggie stabbed him to death. Ronnie was holding him, and this guy, Dickie Hart, Ronnie Hart, their cousin, was involved in it all, stabbing him and holding him, and it was a really messy job, what they did of him anyway. It took a long time to kill him, apparently. It was a bad scene.
Following the murder, Jack McVitie's body was loaded into Tony Lambriano's vehicle. It was brought here to this street in Rotherhithe and left outside St Mary's Church. The following morning, they contacted Freddie Foreman and asked him to deal with it.
Well, they took him across and dumped him right on my fucking doorstep, round the corner from my pub, and left him there in the back of a car, covered up in a bed, in a fucking candlewick bedspread on the back seat of the car. I mean, what a thing to do, I mean. And there was right outside a church where there'd been a wedding take place, and this is what they did. After that incident, there was no reporting there, no, everyone was missing. He was missing, Jack was missing, Mitchell was missing, and Marks was missing. So it was, they was all pointing the finger at me all the time, and of course there was, you can imagine what was going on in at Scotland Yard and places like that.
Every single aspect of the Crays' lives are surrounded by conspiracy theories and myths. In the late 1960s, this flyover was being constructed, and many believe that the bodies of Jack the Hat, Frank Mitchell and Ginger Marks ended up being buried here beneath the foundations.
Freddie Foreman has already admitted what he did. Remember, I was very friendly with the Lambriano brothers, so I know the real story of what happened to Jack the Hat. Tony Lambriano did drive the body away with his brother behind him in another car, all the way to South London, parked outside 3-4 o'clock in the morning outside a little church. Fred was told to pick it up. There was a man that could melt down stuff, the smelter. I think he took care of another 2 bodies.
Ronnie and Reggie were out of control. Freddie Foreman knew that he had to escape from the crime madness before he ended up serving a life sentence. The murder of Mitchell and disposing of McVitie's body should have settled any debt that was owed. But Foreman realised that the Krays were going to continue murdering people for little or no reason and continue using him to clear up their bloody mess.
I was asked to go over again to see them, and I walked into this bungalow, and there was a fella called Charlie Clark. He was an old cat burglar from years ago, and when I walked in there was a terrible atmosphere, and there's Ronnie Kray pacing up and down in his braces with a cigarette, which is to light one after the other, and puffing away, marching up like a caged tiger or like in a cage, you know, and everyone's sitting there with big red faces on them like that. And Charlie Clark's wife's in the kitchen making a cup of tea and cutting sandwiches, shaking. And she looked round at me, and I see a look on her face, and Charlie Clark looked at me and gave me a terrible. I thought, well, what's going on here, you know? And all the rest of the firm are sitting there, look fucking worried out their life. And Ronnie's pacing up and down. I said, what you got me here for? What's the problem, you know? So he said, it's that Billy Gentry. He said, I'm going to, you know, I'll get him. I've sent the firm out to pick him up and bring him back. He's going to do him. I said, what for? What's Billy Gentry done, you know? He's upset me, he did this, he did this. I said, well, you can't fucking do these things. I said, what are you doing? I said, what you got me here for? I can't help you out, you know, I'm not going to help you out in this situation. Billy Gentry's a nice guy, he's a good fella. I've known him for fucking years. I've done loads of bird with him. Every time I went in a nick, he seemed to be there, you know, Bill. He's a nice kid. Anyway, all the rest of them, all the committee, they sent out like 4 fellas to go and pick him up and bring him back so that Ronnie could fucking shoot him, you know, or kill him, whatever way he was going to do it. And I said, no, I'm so sorry. I said, I can't have it. I said, I'm talking him out of it. I said, I ain't got any facilities to handle this situation anyway. I said, it can't be done. Now forget about it, Ron, and you know, calm down. And of course, see, I've just got him round to that, where he accepted the fact that he wasn't going to, you know, go through with it. And the fucking doorbell rings, doesn't it? They're back, aren't they? They've come back. I said, oh, let me go. I went down the passage to get to the door first, opened the door, and if Bill Gentry's there, I'm going to push him and say, now fucking leg it, you run, you know, just go. But they was there. There was Donahue and another couple of people, and they come back and they winked at me. They gave me a wink. They went, we couldn't find him. We looked everywhere. We couldn't go into the front. And then Ronnie cried, did you go down the Widows? Did you go down there? Where did you look there and look for him and everything? And that's just, you know, I thought, what's this fucking man's a fucking lunatic. It dawned on me, you know, I never actually saw him in that condition before. You know, he'd always been sort of half sensible when I spoke to him and met him in the previous times we'd got together. And I thought, so what's he fucking raving mad here, you know? And that was a sort of a very worrying situation then.
Ronnie Kray's attempt to maim or murder Billy Gentry was a turning point for Foreman. He decided that his only way out was to murder the Krays, and he was not the only one considering such a drastic measure.
When Ronnie Kray sat in the car, he always wanted to sit in the passenger seat. So we just sort of larking about, we said, it'd be so easy, just sit behind him. When you find a nice corner, pop him in the back of the head and chuck him out and let him roll down the bank or something. It would have been so easy.
I thought they should be ironed out, to be honest.
You thought the Krays should have been shot?
The 2 of them, yeah.
Why did you think?
Because they was dangerous to everybody, and if they hadn't been arrested when they were, that's what would have happened.
Was that?
Yeah.
That had been.
That was on the cards. Yeah. That was my thoughts and several other people who was connected with me. That was our thought, you know, because they were a danger to everybody and everybody else, and they was out of control. I mean, with people like that topped it, the Billy Gentry thing, you know, when that particular incident, when I reported back to my pals what had happened that night, you know, there's only one thing for it. That's in the Simpsons in the Strand. That took place, you know, discussion.
Before the murderous plan could be executed, Foreman, the Crays and their firm were arrested. Ron and Reg Cray were eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that they serve at least 30 years. Charlie Cray and Freddie Foreman were both imprisoned for 10 years for being accessories in Jack McVitie's murder. Many believed that it was the end for Foreman, but many clearly did not know the man.
The whole objective was when you reached a certain age, you would want to hang your gloves up and retire. I was 37 by the time I've got the first 10-year sentence. The judiciary know that that's your dangerous time from your early teens, 20s and 30s to 40s. If they can lock you away for 10 stretch of that, it slows you right down. Unfortunately, I was still at it when I was 54 years of age.
When Foreman was eventually released, he predictably returned to the only business he knew, crime. At 10:30 in the morning on Easter Monday 1983, 6 masked men broke into the Security Express depot in Curtain Road, Shoreditch. They tied up and blindfolded the guards and doused one in petrol in order to force him to reveal the combination of the safe.
I want to question Foreman in connection with Britain's biggest ever cash robbery at the City of London offices of Security Express in 1983, when an armed gang tied up security guards and got away with £6 million.
News of the audacious robbery stunned Britain. However, slowly but surely, the gang was tracked down and arrested. John Knight and Terence Perkins were convicted of robbery and sentenced to 22 years each. James Knight, John Horsley and William Hickson were sentenced to 6 to 8 years for handling the proceeds of the crime.
4 of the gang have already been convicted. Police looking for the other gang members have made frequent trips to Spain's Costa del Sol.
Foreman and his firm, which included Ronnie Knight, Clifford Sachs, Johnny Mason and Ronnie Everett, had been living in what they believed was the relative safety of Spain. Pursued by the Spanish authorities and the British press, they became known as the Famous Five. After various attempts to extradite the men had failed, Foreman was unexpectedly arrested by Spanish police in 1989 and bundled onto a plane bound for London.
Well, to come out of my apartment and go into the car when they kidnapped me, took me down to the police station in Marbella, and then they banged me up in a cell with all the drunks and smackheads and things, and then they said my lawyer was there because I'd been fighting the extradition. There was no extradition, and I entered the country on my own passport legally, and I did nothing wrong in Spain. There was no reason for them to extradite me or the police to arrest me, but it was totally illegal what they did. And they just forcibly took me out, and they said, there's my teeth marks on the door frame of my bayonet. That's their joke. That's the Guardia Civil. That's their joke, not my joke. They said the Foreman's teeth marks are still on the door frame of the neck where they tried to get me out. I was hanging on to everything. And then when they got me to the police, 100 mile an hour, they were going 90 mile an hour down the motorway. I tried to crash the car and everything, with the driver, and I was handcuffed, so I couldn't do much. And then when I got to the airport, I broke away from when they got me out the plane, drove me straight on the tarmac underneath the plane. The plane's waiting to take off. And they haven't got a passenger on the plane, just a plain, empty plane. And when I got out and I went over the barrier back into the airport, they chased me and caught me, brought me back again, carried me up the stairs. I kicked them, got my foot on the stairs. We all went down the stairs from the top to the bottom and landed on the tarmac again. Then they got very angry with me, the Spanish police, because they got injured and they was punching me in the privates and one thing and another.
Dodgy airlines, eh?
Yeah. And when they got me face down on the plane, on the floor, one very considerate steward, male steward, come up to me and said, "Here, Mr. Foreman, have a drink of this." And he gave me a beaker of drink. I thought it was in August, sweltering hot, and I thought he was giving me a drink of water, and I drank it down, and then I tasted the bitterness in it, and I realised the bastard had doped me. He'd drugged me. He'd given me the knockout drug, and I don't remember much after that. I know they carried me down, and the two Spanish coppers were sitting next to me all the way back to England, and I was still handcuffed with my hands behind my back, and that caused me, I had to have an operation on my wrist. As you see the scar there afterwards, his hands were turning black, you know, with the been laying on them all the time, and they woke me up. They had to wake me up at Heathrow and shake me and wake me up, and then I saw this Fred Cutts coming towards me. He's an ex-yard copper. He's an ex now. He's retired now, but he was walking towards me with a string of other coppers, and they took me off the plane in my shorts and my t-shirt, and there was a bank of photographers all around the airport, all taking photos of me, and on the news that my grandchildren was back over in Spain. They were saying there's Papa Fred there on the news, on the Spanish news, you know.
Foreman was charged with the robbery and handling the stolen cash, but to this day he professes his innocence on both counts.
I was charged with the robbery, but there was no evidence whatsoever, and I was charged with handling money from the robbery, which could have been money from another robbery. It was stated in the charge sheet, cash from the Security Express robbery, right? But there was no evidence that cash, what they found in my bank account, some of it was distributed in an Allied Irish bank. They found 360 grand that had been gone through the bank, but they never found nothing else. That was all the evidence there was.
At trial, Foreman was found not guilty of the Security Express robbery, but guilty of handling the proceeds of the crime, for which he was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment.
I was found guilty of handling this cash from the robbery, which wasn't the cash from the robbery anyway. It was other money, what I'd sold, properties and things that, so the money, I never proved it, so I went for appeal. It cost me a lot of money for my defence, what I had to pay for, and then it was on my appeal, I should have won the appeal because there was no evidence to prove that money came from the robbery. But they deferred it for judgment, and they found some poor fucking Chinaman out in Hong Kong, and looked through the law books, the Archbold's book on law, and they traced this Chinaman in Hong Kong who had been charged with a robbery and receiving money from the robbery, so that set a precedent which covered my case. So they let the 10 years sentence, 9 years, they give me a 9-year sentence, and it's stuck. So I had to serve out the sentence, the whole sentence.
Involved or not, by the time Foreman was a free man again, several of his friends had been murdered or imprisoned after dabbling in the drugs trade. The underworld Foreman had once inhabited and controlled was no more. Drugs had poisoned the minds of villains and destroyed any traces of honour, loyalty and respect amongst them. To Foreman, respect was the oxygen of his world, the benchmark of every man. In his absence, these core values had ceased to exist. However, Foreman's reputation remained.
Of course, they called me the Undertaker and the Eye Executioner and that's in the East End and all things like that, you know. I come to the conclusion that all I wanted, looking back over my life, was respect. You want to give your children a good education, and which I did. I gave my two sons a private education, private boarding schools, and acting and drama schools, and you know, and they never had a job in their life. They never had to work because they worked for me. And none of them went to prison or got any time or anything like that, or got a criminal record. So I achieved what I set out to do.
Now in his twilight years, many will applaud the fact that Foreman and his ilk have retired. Many others will mourn the passing of what they see as the end of old school villainy. Foreman has few regrets, and despite his advancing years, it is apparent to anyone that meets him that the beast still resides within. Regardless of opinion, Frederick Gerald Foreman will never be forgotten. His place in history is secured. Brown-bred Fred will always be one of Britain's most infamous gangsters.